Marcus Rien, founder of Waves CPAs, is going to break down how to align all of your departments, sales, operations, and finance, so that you guys can scale without breaking what's working.
It's important to make sure that you've got 3 horses in your company. Each horse can be represented by your sales function, your operations function, and your finance and administration function. And if any one of those horses isn't running alongside the other 2, you're going to face challenges. I have seen $2 million sales that ended up in a 10% loss because the person selling it didn't understand how operations needed to change and do things differently. It's important to look inward at a company and say, what are we doing today that's going to cause a flat tire down the road? To be able to push through and succeed together is way more rewarding than to push through and succeed by yourself.
You've seen this guy before. It's Marcus Rien. He is the founder and CEO of Waves CPAs, which is an online platform that connects businesses with certified CPAs for fractional work, which is awesome. And he's going to be talking to us today about why companies need their sales, finance, and operations to all work in sync in order to have sustainable growth. Hello again, Marcus.
Hey, Chelsey, thanks for having me back.
It's going to be a hoot. We're going to talk money.
Well, I do enjoy a good jingle in my pocket.
Oh, here we go. So you've worked in finance as a CFO and finance leader at companies. You've worked in operations as a COO at companies and fractional COO at companies. And now you're on the tech side of things as well. So when sales, finance, and operations are not working in sync, what are some of the whoopsies or pitfalls that a company can face?
It's important to make sure that you've got 3 horses in your company, if you're a small or medium-sized business, running the race together and getting to the finish line at the same time. And I think that each horse can be represented by your sales function, your operations function, and your finance and administration function. And if any one of those horses isn't running alongside the other 2, you're going to face challenges. And those challenges are going to be difficult to reverse. They're going to be painful for people to change, to catch up, or to slow down until the 3rd horse catches up with the other 2. Or you might have one horse just outpacing everybody else, in which case there'll be utter chaos throughout most of the company. So it's important to have a certain level of KPI reporting with each of those department heads, and to ensure that there's a certain level of accountability for each of those departments heads as well.
Why is finance such a critical piece in this alignment puzzle?
Finance and administration in this example is important to help operations and sales report on their success or their areas for improvement. And that function can basically provide the data and provide the analysis for which sales leaders can execute on for decision making, whether it's different sales strategy, whether it's for better personnel alignment, or with the operations side, whether it's a good or service being produced, how well they're producing that for the customer to be able to become more efficient or more effective for the bottom line.
You just named a few different ways, but in this case, finance is not just budgeting and reporting, correct?
Yeah, finance and administration. Yeah. So I think that a finance team, they can look at dollars in and out of the company, but a finance and accounting individual can also look at other numbers that represents performance in a company, not just financial performance.
Do you have any examples of what kind of clarity or reporting could help other departments?
Absolutely. Let's look at the sales function for starters. You might have your finance team analyze your salesperson mix. How well are they producing with certain types of customers? What's their output been in total of sales revenue for the last 3 months? What has been their outreach success on converting prospects to customer? You might look at the product mix that you're selling and looking at your gross margin by product type, determining which salespeople are driving the most margin to the business. Because at the end of the day, you need that margin to pay for the company's profitability and the operating expenses for the company.
What does great cross-functional collaboration look like in practice? How can a company start doing this sort of collaboration across the board?
I'm a big fan of EOS. That's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So for anyone listening in on this, I would say you want to check that out. I am not an EOS implementer, which is someone who puts that into your company. I have certainly helped companies with certain aspects of EOS to bring it into the organization. And I've also been integrator, which is one of the areas inside of the EOS toolkit that helps make sure those three horses get to the finish line at the same time. The integrator typically sits between those three department heads, your sales, ops, and your F&A department head. So the integrator sits between those three horses and the visionary, which is typically the founder, CEO, or president, to help carry out the orders and challenge the CEO or founder when they have an idea they want to have executed today, but it needs to be put on the back burner because there's other critical things that the other department heads are working on at the moment.
How big of a company do you need to be to do EOS?
I've seen EOS done with as little as 8 people, and I've seen it being executed on successfully for over 100 people. But I've heard stories of that, working well for companies of 1,000 people. So there's not really a limit or a minimum size. But I think at the end of the day, the EOS model carries a lot of principles that are important for any startup of any size to begin with. Whether you're fully utilizing the full model, that can come at different times and look different ways.
So if you're a founder and maybe you've got like 2 or 3 people that are working with you, you could still read this book and understand the principles before you start building and growing teams, so that way these silos maybe don't start.
Yeah, absolutely. There's tools and tricks that are in the EOS model. The primary book to read is Traction. This is what the book Traction looks like.
Okay.
It's written by Gino Wickman. He's very well known. It's a model that's been proven time and time and again. And I'm sure you can find it on Amazon or eBay or in your local bookstore. It's a pretty common book in the small and medium sized business community.
You mentioned the visionary, which is usually one of the leaders or the CEO who's got these big ideas and will come in and say, "Hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's sell this." And sometimes that disrupts just the day-to-day, what you're already working on, or it creates more silos. They'll tell sales to go sell this thing, but operations isn't really ready to sell it, or finance is like, "Wait, what?" So, if a founder is listening to this and they're a very excited person, what's some advice you would give them to rein it in or just be aware of what they're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I truly believe that every company needs to have that middle person in between the founder or the CEO or the president and their three department heads. Typically, you might see this as a COO to the CEO. And I really believe that that kind of in between allows a honest conversation of what the CEO wants to have carried out, which they wouldn't be able to have directly with their sales leader, with their ops leader, or with their CFO or chief administration officer, because there's going to be just that influence of, I've got to follow the CEO's orders because he's my boss. That's typically what you see when you've got a creative founder or CEO, and they want to just execute on every single idea that comes to their head, but you can't really execute on them all at the same time. People just don't have capacity that way, and things do take longer than you might think. So the integrator is really, or the COO in this case, has an integral part in making sure that they understand what the capacity is, what the projects are going on in the company for each of those department heads, so they can have that honest conversation with the CEO. The CEO might have 10 great ideas, but only 2 may get through that week to the rest of the team. And the other 8 are, up for further discussion, let's talk about this on the road. Let's see if this still applies, when we get to that point. But you can really have a genuine conversation and some respectful challenges between the COO and CEO on those. At the end of the day, it's the job of the COO to make sure that they are truly challenging the CEO in a respectful way, like I said, so the company can move forward in a healthy way as a full team.
Do you have any examples of times that things went off the rail a little bit or got a little too big for their britches and this misalignment got in the way of growth?
I've seen this happen where an integrator is not in place. The CEO is directly involved in all things sales, operations, and finance administration, and there's no integrator there. So he's directly integrating himself into all those levels while still holding the role of running the company, CEO of the company. Not having that integrator in between there has resulted in all department heads feeling pressure to say yes because they're the CEO and not able to say no because there's capacity constraints, because there's limitations, and because, frankly, at the end of the day, the CEO just didn't realize how decision and sales impacted operations and also impacted finance and accounting. So he kind of went to the silo and said, do this. And the other two departments were impacted, which creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of morale issues, and it leaves someone required to clean up the mess at the end of the day. And that creates a lot of distrust in the CEO because, at that point, employees see their leader as someone not thinking through the full request and the impact it has on the company and its people. And that's a big challenge for culture, and it's a big challenge for employee retention.
I was just talking to somebody yesterday who's like, our CEO keeps going out and still going to sales calls or taking their own sales meetings and selling things that we don't do, promising things that we don't do, and then lobbing it over and saying, figure this out, let's do it. And it is wrecking the culture. The whole company and our customers are pissed. The people who have to deal with these are pissed. Like, everyone's pissed. What are some of the other ramifications that you've seen? Like, if sales isn't aligned with operations, you mentioned like capacity. What are some things that can happen there when sales and operations aren't like in sync?
Absolutely. So if you have a founder trying to play sales leader and go out and sell everything under the sun that isn't being done in the company, now operations has to stop what they're doing to make whatever it is happen, whether it's a product or a service. There's a lot of things to talk through with teammates. There's product changes or service offering changes that need to happen, and those don't happen overnight. They take a lot of time. And typically what you'll see is you see a CEO or a founder that promises it can be done overnight, and that's just not reality. So it puts a significant amount of undue stress on its people. And I go back to that integrator, having that person in between allows them to kind of manage the playing field. And you'll rarely find a CEO or a founder that isn't passionate about selling their product. That's why they started the company. That's why they got to the position they are in that company. So it's definitely in their nature to want to go ahead and do those things. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to not just weigh the impact of a customer on a company, but weigh the impact of your decisions on your people in the company. Customers are obviously important. In a business model, they generate revenue, but cost of turnover due to just inappropriate decisions sometimes outweigh the benefit of that revenue dollar.
Yeah. So if you're looking at, oh, well, this customer is going to bring in 50 grand, but you haven't done any of the strategy work to know, okay, what's the actual cost of this extra feature or this extra widget we're building for them, and the stress on the team and all of this, then you don't really know if that 50 grand's a good 50 grand yet.
I have seen $2 million sales that ended up in a 10% loss because the person selling it didn't understand how operations needed to change and do things differently. And that is a terrible, terrible way to approach things. And while $2 million was a lot of money to this company, the impact to the rest of the team was substantial and to the bottom line, more specifically. And, had there been some more discussion between sales and operations, they may not have closed that sale, or they may have sold the product differently.
Mhm.
They may have said, operations, can we do it this way? And they might have said, no, but here's an alternative way to sell it because we can do it this way. And they might have sold it that way to the customer, and the customer might have said, we can handle that change. That'll be okay. And they might have changed the entire profit margin by a total of 40% swing. So it's huge to have those conversations on a weekly basis. I would say have it routine. The EOS model has a weekly 90-minute meeting where those issues are discussed and hopefully solved. in a span of a week's time at most, you could potentially have that answer back to the customer on what is possible to be able to make sure that the company can succeed, not just financially, but with people, because the people obviously look at the numbers, they understand performance, and they know when the company is going to underperform based on just what they physically see running through their systems and their processes.
I come from a sales background, so when you say you could have it back to the customer and an answer back to the customer within a week, I'm like, "A week? I need to know within 5 minutes." So, how do you get these teams connected quickly, but like still slow down, but have this urgency internally? Like, this is a deal that we need to figure out quickly, but we need to make it make sense long term. So I don't make that $2 million mistake.
Yeah, and while I say, you at most you might take a week, that's if you have a meeting on a Tuesday and it happen and that sales call happens on a Tuesday afternoon, that's the extent of a week. That's a full week. If you have the call on a Friday, now it's only, a day and a half of waiting. But I would say that generally speaking, a week is a long time to turn around to a customer, but you're looking at those edge cases. You're looking at those exceptions to your product lines or your service lines that are outside the scope of your typical sales process. So it's not every situation that you're going to come across that. But when you're talking about something that's going to have a huge implication to the company, certainly want to make sure that you're giving it the diligence and the care to make sure you're doing right by not just your company's performance, but also by your customer's performance, because overselling and under delivering to a customer can be more detrimental than losing money on that project.
Yes, indeed. I leave companies if the leadership is overselling. I'm like, wait. I can't morally do it. I don't know. I feel really gross inside,
I think that's fair. I think everybody has expectations when someone says we can deliver this in 2 days and it shows up 6 days later
or it never shows up.
or never shows up. Absolutely. I think that there's a lot to be said about Amazon in the way that they've looked at the customer first. And if the customer has an expectation of buying something and it doesn't meet their needs, they give them a full refund. It's a full, I think was it their ABC policy or something like that? Or A to Z policy or whatever it was. But basically, if you didn't like it, if it didn't meet your needs and felt like you were oversold, you could return it. They gained a lot of market share and they moved very fast, and they've built an entirely, like, I guess you might call it an award-winning brand based on their business valuation over the last 20 years doing things like that.
So let's say we're talking to each other every week. We've got the heads of all the teams or departments talking to each other. We know what's being sold and marketed and sold. We know how we're going to take care of our customers once we sell them. We know how much it's all going to cost us and what we can expect to make. Where can you see finance helping all of this, like a good financial plan or a good financial expert, helping get this even tighter and get this whole little ecosystem ready to scale up and grow faster?
Right. So I'm going to go back to accountability and KPIs. So in the EOS model, and I didn't intend to continually sell EOS here. I've got no financial gain from EOS. I just am a firm believer in it. But they have an accountability chart. Your visionary has a accountability. Underneath him is the integrator. They have an accountability list. And then in each of those department heads, they all have accountability lists. Well, how do you keep somebody accountable? One way to do that is with measurements, some KPIs, key performance indicators. Your accounting and finance team can generate those with the data that they have at their disposal. So your sales team is out selling. That's what they're good at. They're not good at pulling through data and finding it. Your operations team is focused on delivering a service or building a product. They're not focused on pulling data. So leave that to the finance and administration team. They can pull the data, build the dashboards, build those KPIs that are then used for your operations team and used by your sales team to measure their performance and keep those leaders accountable. And those leaders are keeping their team accountable for hitting their sales goals, their output goals for operations, delivery timelines, their customer satisfaction, quotas. So I think that finance can play a big part in just the numbers game between the other two department heads.
I've never had an administrative team help me in that way, ever. It's been like every department fends for themselves and makes their own dashboards. That would be wonderful to have somebody take all of our dashboards, I guess maybe a BI team, like build a BI from, hey, this is all the stuff that operations is doing and have it pull
Yeah.
in. Here's all the sales stuff or whatever you have in Salesforce or HubSpot. Just pull it up and then let's analyze it together.
Yeah, I mean, certain people do things well. Certain people love to do things. In a talent war, as we currently are in, it's what seems to be a lot of different areas. If your team is forced to do things that they're unhappy with, like pull through their own data so that they can go out and sell it, they may choose to go find a company where they don't have to do that, where they really just love selling. So you might lose people that way. So it's an investment in that retention of that good salesperson, but B, if they're really good at selling, are they going to be really good at pulling their own data? And can they do it without bias? Can they build their own report without bias? So having a finance function or finance administrative function building that tool, it is not biased, it's independent, and it can be used as kind of, a Bible for the sales team to show their performance. And not only are sales able to focus on what they're really good at, but you're going to hire someone that's good at pulling data, good at reporting at it. So you're just centralizing that function rather than having it across multiple salespeople and potentially multiple operations people. You're centralizing that responsibility with someone who's actually really good at it, who enjoys doing it, and you're going to have a much more productive and happy team because of it.
Did you ever watch The Wire?
I haven't seen The Wire yet. No.
Okay, so there's this whole thing about juking the stats, and I always say, like, people will juke the stats, they will wiggle their own numbers. I had a marketing director who was saying, "Look at our numbers, look at how great they are," and I had to spend hours going through to be like, "But what? You're actually fudging the numbers, which doesn't help any of us. It makes you look good in this one meeting every week. But by fudging the numbers and being the only one in charge of the numbers, you're hurting the whole business. You're spending thousands of dollars on ads a month, and we're getting 2 customers that pay $100 a month. Like, that isn't good."
Right.
But that's because we were in our everybody was in charge of their own numbers and kind of, not everybody's going to be dishonest or juke the stats, but it's very easy to see why you would want to.
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who isn't motivated by financial gain. And if it means keeping their job with the company, they're going to make decisions that allow them to keep their job. So if they're given that ability to choose between reporting the right information or the wrong information, there are people out there who will choose to fudge the numbers, like you said, to keep their job. And that hurts companies and it hurts teams and it hurts the company's brand for certain when they're out trying to sell something that maybe just performance wise isn't really where it should be.
Is it a culture issue that someone would feel like they need to juke the stats? Like, do they feel afraid or there's finger pointing across departments and that's why they're doing it?
We could certainly get into psychology here a bit. I'm not a psychologist and I didn't play one on TV, but I have a sneaky feeling that when you've got a sales team that they're generally going to be a competitive personality type. So they're also going to be competitive and wanting to beat their team. Given the ability, they may choose to fudge their numbers a little bit to show a little bit better performance because they want to win. They might be vying for a quarterly bonus. Top sales performer in the company gets a quarterly bonus and no one else gets a quarterly bonus. So you might be kind of motivated financially to make that decision. So it's, again, going back to the importance of having an independent, financial analyst pulling that information and reporting on it to protect the company and the ethical approaches that some might take.
I've seen operations do it too. I'm not just going to throw my sales PPs, people. That's staying in.
Sales PPLs, sales PPLs.
PPLs in under the bus because I've seen people on like support teams say, "Oh, we'll just delete that ticket or close it out right away and then answer it in an email so it shows our close time is, whatever the game is, whatever the goals are, there are ways to play the system." So I wonder if why we're playing the system is because we don't have a safe space in those weekly meetings when we're looking at our numbers where we can say, "Hey, yeah, this week our average ticket close was 3 days instead of 1. I know that's longer, but here's what we think happened, and figure it out as a group instead of just like, yeah, it was one day, and really hiding what's happening.
Yeah, let's take a deeper dive on operations now, because someone might look at a customer feedback survey as an indictment on operations performance. And surely your operations team will feel that pain and the impression that it gives on the company of their ability to perform. But it's important to have that feedback not deleted and brought to the top, brought to a meeting with department heads to discuss why did the company underperform. It may not have been a person that underperformed or a team that underperformed. It may have been the company sold something that could not be performed well on. So that allows your department heads or your one of your three horses to raise their hand and say, you're right. We don't typically sell this. It's okay we didn't perform well on it because we kind of knew we wouldn't, but we did it for this XYZ reason, and commend your staff for doing the best they could with the resources they had. Secondly, well, that's addressing the fact that the company or that person or that team didn't perform well. But then secondly, going to the sales function and saying, maybe we shouldn't sell this again. We learned we couldn't do it. We knew we couldn't. We didn't think we could do it, or maybe we thought we could, but we weren't sure. And so we delivered and it didn't meet the customer's expectations. We tried. We either need to spend more time in the operations side to be able to build that product or service in a way that can meet a customer's needs, or just tell sales we're not going to continue to deliver or sell that product or service anymore. Those decisions don't come to light if people have the ability to manipulate their own feedback or their own numbers or their own responses that might result in poor KPIs.
This is all great. Have you ever been a part of a team where you can point out the ugly things and the things that aren't working well and then work on it together across these functions to get better overall?
Yes, I absolutely have.
What did it feel like?
Whether it's in life or in business, those aha moments, they're just simple at the core for me. When you get to a point and you realize that you've won as a sports team or you've won as a company team, it feels good. It feels good to be part of something, be part of change, be part of a win, be part of something successful. You had to work hard, you had to grind through it, you had difficult times, you had ups and downs. But then in the day, to be able to push through and succeed together is way more rewarding than to push through and succeed by yourself.
I agree. It is more fun. So, as finance is putting together these reports for the team or just showing here's where things are, what are some things they can bring to light about services, product lines, and the performance that impact the overall profitability of the company?
So the finance and accounting function is obviously to put together a set of financial statements that depict how the company has performed and to some extent forecast how the company will perform. So if you look at top line revenue, you're looking at basically the sales function. So you're going to look at trends over time on revenue. You could look at it as a consolidated product line or service line and say, how are we trending over the past 12 months? Have we trended where we thought we were going to trend? Now we can break it down even further and see, is it, a particular person or is it what we're selling that is underperforming in terms of total sales dollars? That might change the way we approach our customer base. It might change our outreach, or you may not even have an outreach program. You might just be relying on referrals. And now you need to create an outreach program to get more customers. So that's kind of addressing the top line reporting function. If we look at down further on a profit and loss statement to gross margin, you're going to look into your operational performance. So, each kind of department has a part in the P&L. So sales has revenue. So the sales team is looking at, we're looking at revenue. Operations, we're looking at how do we perform on that thing we sold. And then finance and administration are obviously more in the OpEx area. So you can look at gross margin by product or service category. That can be an indicator for the company to change the way they are making something or delivering a service to become more profitable. Or it might be an indicator that, we're as efficient or effective as we can be from an operations team. We actually just need to sell it higher if we want to continue to provide this as a value to the customer. So I think, there's different ways to break out gross margin based on what kind of company you are, whether you're selling a good or a service. So I think it's important just to make sure you have the ability to break out that data so that you can analyze it. That's an important part of the finance and accounting and administration function. Where I like to get into even more is the forecasting. We've got these last 12 months, we've performed this way, and we've made these qualitative assessments as to why we are where we are. Now, if we want to get together as a team of leaders and decide what do we want the next 12 months to look like, well, we need to make certain decisions today. So if we make certain decisions today, how does that affect our forecast for the next 12 months for revenue or for gross margin profitability? And that's kind of bringing in a qualitative analysis into a forecast and allows the company to predict where they're going to earn money and how much money they're going to earn. And then how much money are we going to need to spend in terms of CapEx or other operating costs to get us to that point? If we want to, let's say, open up a new service line in our company, well, we're going to have to hire 3 or 4 more operations people and maybe one more person to sell it. And so we need to look at that spend. And if we do that, we know that we're going to make, another $10 million and we're going to make, $6 million in gross margin on that. So if we're going to make $6 million in gross margin on that, I think we can hire 4 people that might come up to, even, let's just call it $1 million just for round numbers. So I think we can spend 25%, of our margin to get that.
How do you rein in this qualitative part of forecasting? So if someone's overly optimistic with forecasts, like, oh yeah, we can sell this to 30 companies a month, no problem. This service, they're going to eat it up. They love it. How do you rein in that optimism to make it more of a realistic cast so you don't overhire or you don't overspend?
You certainly have to understand that a person that is going to be out selling your product to customer is going to be able to sell it. They're going to be able to say, yes, we can do this. Yes is kind of in their vocabulary, one of their only words that they use. So of course, internally, they're going to use that same word. They're going to use the same optimism, that same, ambitious response. And that's where it really takes, it takes a gut. It takes leaders with gut, like a gut, not just, by the numbers. If we put it on a pretty spreadsheet, is this going to be, this looks great on a pretty spreadsheet or, on a great report or a dashboard, but it takes a gut to say, can that really be delivered upon? Can that really be done? And then challenge it. Listening to someone say, yes, we can, yes, we're going to sell, all of that, kind of what you had just said. The follow-up question is, why do you think we are going to be able to do that? Ask a little bit more of a penetrating question. Where do you think the resources are going to come from for that? What does your year look like in terms of your vacation, your PTO, and the key conferences we need to attend that are going to make that feasible? People aren't just workhorses, they're people. They have outside interests outside of work, and it's important to understand that. So having a really ambitious goal doesn't mean they're going to work day and night 12 months to get there. They're going to want to go out and spend time with family, have outside interests. And it's important to challenge those overambitious responses with some realism and understanding that as a leader in a company, we want them to have a well-balanced life. Challenging, I guess, someone that is very optimistic and say, I love the ambition, but, how do we think we're going to be able to achieve that realistically? Because it's not going to be you by yourself. And that's okay. If we need to bring someone else in to get to where we need to go, we're willing to do that. And we want to make sure that you continue to be happy here. And if you're overworked, you may not be happy to stay.
I hear people say BHAG with like the big, hairy, audacious goal, like it's a badge of honor. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're never going to hit it, that's like making a sales quota that no one's ever going to hit. It doesn't do anybody any good. It's got to be realistic.
Do you recall where you've heard that BHAG before?
Multiple places.
Because that's actually a term that we use in the EOS model.
Well, I don't like it.
um,
Unless people are using it in the wrong. I bet people are using it in the wrong way. They're weaponizing BHAG.
I'm used to associating it with a 10-year, in other words, stretch goal.
Okay, well, I'm talking people saying our BHAG for the next quarter. And I'm like, wait, what? Awesome. Any other advice for how these different functions, we've talked sales, operations, finance, how them working in sync can really set a business up for better growth.
The word that comes to mind is cohesion. When things work in sync, like in physics, it's, a well-oiled machine. There's less friction. Without oil, without proper lubricant, you've got friction in machinery. Businesses can run the same way. Where you've got friction in an organization, you're going to have breakdowns. You're going to have engine rebuilds. You're going to have a flat tire that's going to, delay you. So having wheels on the car that are all working the same way, engines that are working with proper lubrication, for lack of better words, you're going to have a vehicle that's going to move down the road with the team inside of it without a lot of disruption. So I would say it's important to look inward at a company and say, what are we doing today that's going to cause a flat tire down the road? Do we have an engine that's going to be well lubricated? Do we have a driver of the car and a great navigator that's going to get us to our destination, not just safely, but ahead of our competition? And it really takes that kind of that gut approach, an EQ person, so to speak, who can understand a little bit more about the data side too, to look at what are the numbers and what's realistic for the team that we've got, the skill sets that we've got, the people that we have, their ambitions, their career objectives, their passions, and make sure that everyone is in an alignment and that we're doing the right things to keep the repairs on the car and the lubrication going well in the company, to make sure we're all in synchrony, we're all moving together in the same direction.
It's a good takeaway.
I'm a friend of analogies.
Technically a Marcusism.
I don't know. That was kind of a Marcusism. I feel is a little bit shorter.
Succinct.
Yeah, it's a little Marcusism might be more succinct, but I definitely like to use analogies to bring real world perspectives into ideas I have.
Well, you've just given us real world reasons why to have these departments working together, the importance that a finance team can play across all of them. I've never thought of it like that before because we've been siloed at a lot of companies where I've worked. Is there any last bit you want to say before I'll do a nice wrap up?
I don't know if I went over this already, but I'll go over it again. I think it's really important to make sure that the 3 department heads are all operating at the same speed. So these are making sure that the 3 horses are going to get to the finish line at the same time. And that means that sales isn't outselling what operations can deliver in terms of, timeline to delivery or how they deliver it. And it's important to make sure that you have the correct KPIs and reporting metrics for that thing that you're selling so that you can report back on how operations did on that thing that was sold and how that revenue impacted the company when it was sold, so that the team entirely can look at, was this a good business decision? If you don't have those 3 horses aligned every step of the way in that way, you're going to make financially poor decisions and you're going to put undue stress on teams. So it's really important to make sure that those 3 horses are trotting along at the same pace. You can certainly, put some rocket fuel in their food overnight and once in a while push them a little harder. But at the end of the day, people will run out of steam. So it's important not to oversell and underdeliver on any of those 3 areas.
What's faster, a trot or a jaunt?
Oh, a jaunt to me just sounds faster than a trot.
I've had fun on this episode learning about alignment. It's one of my favorite topics. And next time that we're joined together, we're going to be talking about the importance of budgeting season and what else goes along with that.
Budgeting season has a huge impact on your ability to look at next year's forecast and predict a little bit about company performance and financial performance. So I'm excited about our next session, Chelsey, that we're putting together a pretty good series here. And we're going to have a great time, as always.
A barrel of laughs, trotting and jaunting.
I have to actually go look up those 2 definitions now and see what the difference is. I'm very curious.
And to trounce.
And trounce. That's a new word of the week for Marcus.
Yes, he trounced people in volleyball. 3 wins over this one team. Trouncing. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.